Okay, here we are. I've created a new Blender scene and I've appended all of the parts out of the other Blender scene into this one. If you're unfamiliar with appending, you can simply go to File, Append, and then it'll ask you which Blender file you want to go to. Go to the one where you modeled this stool in the first place, and then select all of the objects that you want to append out of the object category, and then hit Append, and it'll appear in a new Blender file. What that does for us is it leaves the original in another file that we can always go back to in case we make a mistake. And then this gives us a fresh file to mess around with. So if we mess this up at all, we can just scrap this file, go back to our other one, and append it in again. So that's a good practice to make sure that we always have our original model saved somewhere, which allows us to just correct mistakes should we make one. Okay, so first things first, before we can create an ID map, not an ID mask, like I said in the last video at the end there. I didn't feel like editing it out, so I'm correcting it now. An ID map is basically our ability to use Vertex colors to assign it to each part of our model in order for Substance Painter to be able to tell where different materials are going to go. If this all just had one material, it'd be real easy. We could just export it and then just put one material on and we'd be done. But we want actually to have this stool have multiple pieces and parts that have different materials. Most of it's going to be a metallic color, and I'm probably just going to use the same color. But the feet are going to be a silver metallic color, and the seat of the chair is going to be wood. So we want to be able to separate all those out in Substance Painter. So that's what an ID map is, not an ID mask. Okay, cool. A couple things first before we get started. I noticed on my stool, and this is where we should look at it and determine whether we need to change things about it. It's still all separate parts. We can still do whatever we want to it. One thing I noticed is this footrest is, in my opinion, too low. So all I'm going to do is just drag it up and bring it up just a little higher, and we'll put it on the outside. When we do that, we got to make sure it's still contacting the other one pretty good. I'm going to bring it up just a little higher, something like that. And that looks a little better for the scale of this stool. This is a place where if you did something and you want to change it, this is where we want to do that. That's the only change I'm going to make. Another thing we have to do before we create this ID mask and join everything together is we have to make sure that the normals are facing the right direction. So we're going to recalculate the normals. So the way we do that is we hit C and select the entire chair. We have to make sure one object is the active object, this one here, and the rest of the stool will follow. If we hit Tab now, we can see the entire stool is now in edit mode. If we hit A, we can see that the entire stool is now selected. And if we hit Shift N, we can see that we've recalculated our normals, and you can see it down here in the bottom. So we've recalculated our normals, which just basically says that the normals are all pointing outwards instead of inwards. And that's important because when we get into Substance Painter, if our normals aren't correct, parts of our model will appear to be see-through or inverted, or all kinds of weird stuff can happen. And then the textures just won't go on it correctly. So recalculating the normals out beforehand is pretty important. All right, let's hit Tab to go back into object mode. Okay, cool. So another thing we need to do is we need to make sure that all of our modifiers are applied in order to join this together. If some things have a subdivision surface modifier or other modifiers on them, but other parts don't, when we go to join them, it's going to get confused and think that everything needs that or not. So just to check, you should go through your entire model and make sure that you didn't use any modifiers on there. And if they are, then let's apply them. And I remember pretty well what we did. We didn't use a subdivision surface modifier on anything but these handles. So if I click it, check our modifier tab, and you can see I've already applied it. But if yours are not applied, you need to go ahead and apply them. It has to be done in object mode. So you just select it. It should say over here if you have a sub D on there still. If you do, just hit apply. I've already applied these. So the rest of the model has no subdivision surface models or modifiers on it. And anyways, if one part has a modifier and other parts don't, it'll get confused when you go to join this whole thing together. So that's something to think about. Okay, so now we're ready to join this entire thing together. So all we do is we hit C, and we're going to select the entire stool. We have to make sure one object is the active object. You can see it's that one back there. I'm going to hit Shift, left click, and make it the top of the seat, just for, I don't know why. You can make it any object you want. One object has to be yellow while the rest are orange. And then if we right click, we can join. Okay, now, weird things happen when we join things like this because our smoothing groups seem to get kind of messed up. So if we just simply come over here to our smoothing group, and then we're going to just change this angle above 30 because that's kind of default. So as soon as we do that, we see that our smoothing comes back. And for some of them, we may need to take it up pretty high, like the little knobs. So if you check it out up here, we can see that these knobs still need to go up above 45, I think it was. Something like that. Okay, those look pretty good. And now let's check the rest of our stool just to make sure we didn't mess anything up by doing that to our objects. Okay, so everything looks good. We don't have the faceting. Again, if we did have some of that faceting, even if you put a heavy sub D on these and thought it looked smooth in Blender, some of the effects in Substance Painter will still detect the little faint edges. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I think we're ready to rock. Okay, so now this is all one object now. Now if we open up a UV editor, I'm going to split the screen here. Let's bring this up a little bit. And then if we hit Tab to have the whole thing, we can open up a UV editor, and we can see that we get this big jumbled crazy mess. And basically what it did was it took all the stuff we already unwrapped and just stacked it in here, and so it looks pretty confusing. So what we can do is we come in here, and with everything selected, we can hit U and unwrap, and it'll take a second, and then it'll give us this a little bit better unwrap. It's laid everything, kept everything basically in the same scale it needs to be. And for me, this is all we need to have here. So now what we have is we have this object that's just one object. We've unwrapped each piece individually to make sure they looked good unwrapped. Then when we've joined this object and unwrapped it again, now we get this new UV. So this is what we need. We need all of our objects to be unwrapped on one UV. That's why we went through and took the time to unwrap each object as we made them, made sure they looked good, made sure their scale was applied. And now when we join this object and then unwrap the whole thing, we get this better UV. So this is going to be perfectly adequate for this project. In a more advanced setting, you may want to change this around by moving stuff around. Down the road, I may have a tutorial on how to move stuff around in the UV here, change the scale and all those kind of things. But for this project, this looks really pretty good. I'm going to go with it. Some people might complain and say this is not a very good UV, but we'll see at the end what the result is. Okay, cool. I'm going to close this up. Actually, I'm just going to close it. Join areas and join that side. Okay, cool. So now we have our whole stool set up. I'm going to hit Tab to go into object mode. We're looking smooth. We got all of our smoothness where we want it. So now it's time to create a Vertex paint map. It's going to be the ID map. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign colors. So it's super important, if we hit Tab, we were just in it, that we hit Alt A to deselect everything. For this process to work, we want to make sure that there's nothing selected in edit mode. Okay? All right, now if we go up here and we click where it says edit mode, and we can go down into what's this one called Vertex Paint. And we'll get this menu here. We got all these controls along the top here, and then if you want, you can come over to this toolkit right here and just click it, and we'll get these other options here, which we'll need here in a second. Okay, and then we want to come up to this one right here, right next to Vertex Paint, Face Select Mode. Now, it shows all of our geometry in Face Select, which is pretty cool. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to create a color. I'm going to create a color that I want to use as the ID for all of the metal parts that are going to be like a black metal. So if we come right over here, I'm going to slide this up to blue, something like that. And then I'm going to click this one that says Color Palette. And then we're going to create a new color palette. And then I'm going to add, by hitting this plus sign, this blue color. Now you don't have to do this, but if you find out you skipped something at the end, trying to match this color again is going to be kind of challenging. So let's just put it in a color palette so we can go back to it if we need to. All right, so now with this blue color selected in our palette, we can come up here into our model and we can hover over pieces and parts now. If we hover over each part and we hit the L key, we'll see that it starts changing the color of it. Now I want to just, if you just keep hitting L, it'll keep selecting all of the pieces and parts that you want to be this color. So we'll just hit L again, L, and you might have to hit a couple times on some objects for some reason, like the tips of these we're going to have to hit multiple times. So just go through and hit everything that you want to be metal. And then there's a couple little weird anomalies here too that we have to look at. So, but for now, let's just go through and we're just going to hit L. And by the way, that works in edit mode. If you wanted to select pieces of a part that you had joined earlier, you could go into edit mode and hit L and it'll select just those pieces. So it's kind of a handy thing to remember. L, L. And then if we look in here, we can see that some of this stuff inside here may not have been selected. So let's just hit L to make sure it got selected. Maybe underneath here didn't get selected either. And you can see down below here, we have some stuff that didn't get selected. So just keep clicking L. And we'll go all the way down the stool till we have all the pieces and parts that we want that are going to be the same material. L for this bottom stool here. We're not hitting the feet because we want those to be a different color. And it disappeared on me. All right. And we're back. And then I want this rim to be metal as well. So we're going to hit L. Okay, and that looks pretty fair. I'm going to go on the inside of that rim as well because it looks like it's not getting any color. And then it looks like it's going to make me do the edge too. So just make sure all the pieces and parts of all the metal things you can see have this color. Like this top of this rim is not selected yet, so let's hover over it and hit L. Okay, and then once we're sure we've got all of our pieces and parts, and let's look up inside there, look around. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I think we got all of our pieces and parts we needed. Make sure that they're all selected. All the metal parts that we want to be this black material are selected. And then once we do that, we can hit Shift K and they'll all turn blue. Okay, and then since I didn't get this top part for some reason, didn't seem to do what it wanted to do, I'm going to hit Alt A to make sure nothing's selected. And then I'm going to hover L above that, make sure it's selected now. Its bottom didn't seem to get selected either. So that's an anomaly you can get there too. And then let's hit Shift K. And now that's all blue. So now all of the pieces and parts of our stool are blue like we want. Blue is what we're going to use in Substance Painter as the ID color for a certain material, the black metal material that we're going to apply. Okay, and so then if we hit Alt A to make sure nothing is selected now, because if we go to add another color and we had Alt A select, or we had stuff selected, it's just going to give it that color as well. So Alt A to make sure nothing is selected. Okay, now we can come right over here. I'm going to grab this color picker. I'm going to take it to red. So once I have that, I want to add that to my color palette in case I have to go back. So let's add it, and there it is. So I can always come back and select that color. Now, the only thing that I want to be red is the seat. So if I L, hover over it, I'm going to have to get these edges here too. And then let's go beneath in case somebody looks at it from below and hit this bottom layer. So L, and it looks like we've got it all. Okay, that's enough there. And now if we hit Shift and K, we've just selected all of that seat as its own red color. Now I need to hit Alt A to make sure nothing's selected to go on to the next color, which is for our feet. So I'm going to come down here to this color picker, and then we're going to raise it up into the green zone, somewhere like that. It doesn't really matter what color it is, as long as it's different than the other ones. And then I'm going to add that to our palette in case I need it again. And now I'm going to go down and select the feet. So we're going to get right in here, and we may have to select a couple pieces of the feet. So let's just get to it. All right, that was pretty easy. Remember, we're hitting the L key to make sure we get all the pieces we want. Sweep this around here. L. To get the bottom. L. And then let's bring this one around front. L. And L. And so we have all of those selected. Now we can just fill those in by hitting Shift and K. Now we see that this all has Vertex colors. The feet are going to have their own material. Everything that's blue is going to have its own material. And then the seat's going to have its own material as well. Okay, so we're looking pretty good so far. Last thing we need to do now is we need to export this stool as a model. So I'm going to hit Tab to go into, we're in kind of object mode. I'm going to go up here in the corner, actually. I think you have to do to go into object mode. We're going to make sure that the stool is selected and nothing else is selected, no lights or anything else like that. And then we're going to go File, and then we're going to hit Export. And then we're going to pick the one that says FBX. Now we get this place here. I'm going to put this on my desktop, so you can just click Desktop. That'll show you what's on your desktop. And you can see I have an industrial stool practice one here. So I'm going to just put it right here. And then a couple things I need to change. Select objects, selected objects, that's all I want. We only have the chair selected, so let's click that one. And object types, I just want it to be a mesh. Okay? And then let's give this a name. Let's just call it bar stool. And I'm going to underscore, or sorry, I'm going to BARSTOOL underscore 1, we'll call it. You call it whatever you want. Oh, I'm messing that up pretty bad. I'm terrible at typing, so bear with me. Shift underscore and 1. That'll be the name of it. You name it whatever you want. Make sure that you've put it somewhere you can remember on your desktop. I called it bar stool 1. I have to hit enter for it to accept it. We've selected objects here, and then we can hit export FBX, and that will have went to our desktop or wherever we saved it. Okay, that's all we need to do to import this model now into Substance Painter, so I'll see you in the next one.